Star Trek Voyager again. And I do want to draw your attention to the title sequence and ask you to think about Powers of 10 and to think about how the TV episode is constructed, because it is written and it is controlled by a director, by editors, by the sound and light design people. So we're going to ask you to take apart this text in the same way that you would take apart a literary text as you did with cold equations. The Omega Directive, again, brings us to the questions about ethics and science, and when is it right to pursue science to the exclusion of other considerations, such as the safety of a planet and a quadrant and the ability to travel in space. Seven of Nine is the key character here, and she and her concerns are very central, and keeping in mind her sort of dual identity will help you understand why she thinks the way that she does. She is trying to understand what it means to be human. And at the same time, we have an episode here that far exceeds the Bechdel test, Bechdel, named after Alison Bechdel, who asks that a text, she talks about films, but it applies to TV as well, that it have two female characters who talk to each other about something other than a man. And so there's a lot of conversation between Captain Janeway and Seven of Nine about the practice of science, which is, I think, very illuminating and very provocative.
This actually reminds me of the Manhattan Project during World War II. The secrecy that is in place here, where only the starship captains even know about this thing, and that if you find out about it, basically they have to kill you, is quite like during World War II when they were trying to develop the atomic bomb, and anybody who talked about it would be arrested and tried for treason. It's very similar that way as well, that they were developing this thing that could destroy the world. And so the Omega particle is very parallel to this, where the scientists obviously want to understand the universe, want to understand all the laws of physics, but by studying this thing, they are opening a door which cannot be closed. And that obviously in World War II, the ethics were much simpler because they were fighting these evil enemy and so they could certainly make the argument that they needed this bomb, to win the war. But then after the war, a lot of scientists had second thoughts about it and wondered whether this was something that they should be working on.
And I think it's important to look at the rhetoric, the language that is used to justify scientific inquiry that may be dangerous and deleterious for everyone. The alien scientist says they need it to produce energy, and so we might want to think about our own world and our own energy consumption and how that drives or affects the world and other people and other creatures on it. So again, we find Star Trek Voyager being very relevant to human concerns, contemporary human concerns. So as you watch this episode, maybe again, maybe a few times, look at how it's constructed and how these issues are brought up and reinforced through camera angles, through lighting, through dialogue, through the actors' performances. There's a lot to study here, and I hope that you will enjoy it, but I hope you will also be able to take it apart and understand how this episode, the Omega Directive, works.
One other parallel with the end, where they trying to decide whether to destroy the Omega particle completely, is today with the smallpox virus, because smallpox has been completely eradicated from the earth. There's nobody suffering from it anymore, but there are samples of it still in the lab. And there's a discussion going on between scientists as to whether they should destroy the last samples so there's nothing left that could ever escape or be used by bad people to spread smallpox again. But of course, the other scientists are arguing that they need to preserve it for scientific study in the future. And so that's some of the discussion about the Omega particle runs along those lines.
And I guess I'd just like to add, as maybe a final word on this subject, that there is a scientist, a Nobel Prize award-winning scientist called Barbara McClintock, who studied corn DNA, and she said, in words that almost echo Seven of Nine's, that when she looked at the DNA the corn seemed to be looking back at her. So there is a degree, too, when a scientist studies something, that they become so enamored it becomes a part of their identity or of their essence. So at some point, maybe we can ask Jeff, who studies stardust, what is his relationship with stardust, and how does he see stardust and humanity interacting?
When I look at a nebula, I think it's looking back at me.
It is. It is.
Anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode.